Please welcome Mindy Lipinski.
Hello, hello. It sounds like I've got good volume. Y'all good? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Because I was like 5 minutes into a chicken talk yesterday and nobody could hear me. So my name is Mindy Lipinski. My family and I own Revercomb Farms. We're right outside of Bridgewater, Virginia. We do pastured piglets, poultry, and eggs, and also a menagerie of homesteading and processing workshops on our farm. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, or you have any additional questions, come find us. We're over. They stuck us back in the corner. I guess we were bad influences on people, but anyway, we're all the way back in the corner of this building over here. So please come seek us out if you have any additional comments or questions, or want to know a little bit more about us. So my contact information is up here. I also have business cards at the table if you want to reach out to me for, again, any additional information, including a copy of this whole PowerPoint presentation. I'd be happy to email it to you if you find some useful information in here, which I hope you do. So that is me, and that's my handsome husband on the back of the bush hogger. So if you are in this talk because of a spouse that has great ideas, find Bobby. I'm pretty sure at this point he's going to be starting a spousal supporter group. Okay, so the topics that we're going to cover today, it's going to be a pretty comprehensive, I hope, talk. So whether you're brand new to pigs, you're just considering them, or you have some experience, and I hope that you can find some value in the things that we're going to talk today. And all of the pictures in my slides are actually my pigs on my farm, because I love to take pictures of my pigs. So you can kind of also see what my pigs are, how they're kept and how I manage them. So we're going to start off with things to consider before you even get a pig, hopefully, to help you make a better, more calculated decision on if you should even do it and what you should consider before jumping in. Talking about choosing a piglet, things to look for, basic supplies, husbandry supplies, containment systems, some pasturing systems, because are all pigs pastured? No, but specifically this is a talk about pastured pigs. Nutrition, breeding, and processing. Okay, so things to consider if you have not already made the leap into pigs. Pigs are social, so one pig by itself is probably not the happiest pig. A pig with another species is better than a pig by itself, but it's still not ideal. I always recommend to everybody to not just have one pig, at least have 2 or 3. And if you're going to raise one, you might as well raise 2 or 3, and then that way you can sell the second or the third one and then pay for yours, and you're at least getting your meat for free. Pigs are smart. If you notice in this picture, I am soaking wet. The reason I am soaking wet is because my best big girl in the background decided that she was going to open the gate, and a 20-minute of tag pursued in a thunderstorm. My husband didn't think to help, he just thought to laugh. So they are smart. If you have any weakness in your systems, they're going to find it, they're going to exploit it, and they're going to be looking, and they're going to find it every single time. They will keep you humble for sure. So the game is to always be one step ahead of the pig. If you don't manage them, they can be destructive. These things are designed. They are little excavators with noses. They've got little pointy feet. They can do some damage. They will do some damage. You can try to fight it, or you can try to manage them, and you can try to use what they are good for to your benefit. And we just talked about this. They are useful. I don't ever try to fight against their nature. I don't ring my pigs. No judgment if you do. I know lots of people who do, but I know that their natural tendency is to a roof. I don't try to fight that. I don't try to inhibit that. But in that, I do have to manage them so they don't ruin my property and ruin my pastures. And I want them to be an asset and not a liability. And next to a chicken and a deer, they are super easy to process. If you are already at the level where you can process a deer, you can do a chicken. The next natural thing that I always encourage people to try is a pig, because they're really easy to do. You don't need a lot of equipment, you don't need a lot of infrastructure to do it, and just about everything is edible in a pig. It's really hard to mess it up. Okay, so you've decided you're absolutely going to do it. You're searching for a piglet. So the first thing, just like with my chicken talk yesterday, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what are you wanting to get out of this pig? Do you want meat? Do you want big pork chops? Do you want a big ham to roast for Christmas? Do you want to make bacon? Do you want all of the things that that you think about as far as these big cuts, these big cured things? Do you want that? Do you want lard? Is that more valuable to you than the big pork chops? And it's because, basically speaking, you can break the pigs down into two groups. There are the lard type breeds and there are the meat breeds. I do the meat hogs. So these are the hogs that get super, super big. They're at a processing weight of 250 to 350 pounds, depending on how you manage them, what you feed them, in 6 to 9 months. That's what we choose to do. But like I said, they get super big. We just culled my biggest boar last year, and I don't know how much he weighed because our scale didn't go over 720 pounds, but he was a big dude. Maybe you have a smaller area. Maybe you're a little intimidated by an animal that size. You can have your reasonings, but they also have these smaller breed pigs, like the Coonies, the American Guinea Hog, stuff like that. I don't raise them, but I know people who do. And there's no right or wrong answer to what type of pig you should get. You should just be very clear on what you have and what you're going to get out of it. The lard type pigs, you're looking, what the meat hogs, you're looking at a final processing timeline of 6 to 9 months. And like I said, you can be 250 to 350 pounds anywhere in that weight range. If you get a Cooney, you're looking at an 18 to 24 month grow out, and you're looking at a hanging weight of maybe 100 pounds. Also, they're smaller, so you're not going to get the big cuts. You're not going to get these big pork chops. The people that I know specifically that raise the Coonies, they do sausage, they do lard, and I don't know that they salvage any of their other cuts. I don't really know a lot about it because I don't raise them, but don't expect to buy a little lard type pig and expect to get the benefits of a meat type pig. They're two totally different things, and depending on your situation, one might be better for you than the other. Just like any animal that you're seeking to buy, to raise up, to feed your family, and you're bringing it on your farm, you need to look for signs of a healthy piglet. I have bought piglets like at the auction house before. I don't anymore, but I have done it. I really recommend, just like with any animal, I told the chicken people yesterday, if you can go and buy piglets directly from the farm, that's what I really recommend people do, because you're going to see how they're kept, you're going to see how they're managed, you're going to see how those people treat their animals. You want a piglet, just like within most other animals, they need to be active, they need to be healthy. Little baby piglets should be plump. I mean, they're pigs. They should just be perky. They should have bright eyes. Just common sense kind of stuff. There is no sure indication one way or another that you are looking for, but just use your good judgment. I know I've got a lot of buyers of my piglets, and one year I had an unfortunate situation where I was fighting with a sow. She had her piglets out in the field. She wouldn't let me put any type of shelter over them. We fought back and forth. Literally, I was fighting with this girl for a couple days. Anyway, it was that really cold, wet January that we had a little while back, and some of her piglets got cold, and I noticed that by the time that I went to wean these piglets, a lot of them had lost part of their tails to what I presume to be frostbite. And I had buyers, especially these old timers that would not buy pigs because they said, well, pig doesn't have a curly tail, it's not a happy pig, it's not a healthy pig. I can't judge if that piglet is healthy or not because it doesn't have a tail. So, I've heard that. I don't think that's a hard and fast rule, but in general, if the entire pig is droopy, including its tail, then, that I think there is some truth to that, but I don't think it's a hard and fast rule. Anyway, if possible, go to where the piglets are, make a good judgment, and it's really not worth the risk. It is not worth the risk to bring things onto your farm, parasite-wise, bacteria-wise, that you're going to have to battle. I had a lapse in judgment a couple of years ago. I had somebody bring pigs that we kept in our barn for a couple of months. Salt and pig lice were fun. It was gross. It was anyway. Make good judgments. We just talked about where to buy electric line trains. Pigs are easy to contain with electricity, but they have to be trained. They don't know. And so if your intentions are to totally contain your pigs with electricity, then you need to know whether or not they are trained to that or not. So don't just assume that they are. You need to ask, and if they're not, then you need to train them as well. Also, that's not really effective until your piglet is at least 80 to 100 pounds. So, have some sort of contingency plan to contain them until they're at least, that big. Then you can certainly contain them with an electric line. And then deworming, I don't know why that's controversial. I don't have a strategic deworming plan on my farm. My breeders, I just deworm when I feel like they need to be dewormed. And obviously, if I saw signs like when I saw those lice a couple years ago that had been caught in, I had to deworm everybody. I don't do it if it's not needed, so I'm not deworming everybody, even every year, I would say. But for my piglets, I deworm the entire litter when I'm castrating. I deworm them one more time before they leave, and then that way at least I know that they're leaving on a clean slate. And what you do, that ivermectin is going to be well out of their system by the time you go to process. So if you never want to deworm them again, then that's fine. But at least I know that I'm sending a piglet off on a clean slate, and it would not be a bad idea if you're unsure to just go ahead and give a deworming when you bring those piglets in, and at least you're not bringing stuff onto your farm. Okay, basic supplies. Then we'll break these down and talk about all of these separately, but you need a feeder, waters. Pastured pigs need a wallow. If you don't give them one, they will make one. Shelter and bedding. So the feeders. So these are all different things that we use on our farm. My little pointer isn't kind of great, but anyway, these rubber tubs that you can just get at the supply house. Those are awesome. They're very durable. The pigs are going to step in them, carry them around, play with them, whatever. So we use a good amount of the tubs all around our farm. The feeders, pigs are disruptive, as we talked about in one of those earlier slides. So we make our own troughs. Sorry. So that white thing right there, that is like a 35-gallon barrel. Yes, okay. That my father-in-law, he just cut it in half long ways. He cut out the sides, the top of it, stuck it together. There's a board that's screwed to the front to kind of keep it as one unit. And then you have to screw those things to the fence because those pigs will carry it off. So it is screwed to that board, and that board is screwed to each one of those posts. We had a metal trough feeder too that was just a livestock feeder, even though it was heavy and I could barely move the thing myself. The pigs have drug that down into the field too, and so we had to affix it to a board and we affix it to the post. You can't really see because the picture is half, but my favorite feeders that we have are just those feed barrels, those 55-gallon food grade barrels. Just cut them in half. They can go down into the field. The ones that I use for feeders, I chain those things to the fence posts so that way they're not being drug everywhere, because I like to just throw the feed over the fence and not go on a hunt for the feeders. And I don't bulk feed most of my pigs. That's just, I don't know. I've always done it that way. But bulk feeding is certainly an option, and that's what that second picture is too. That's a homemade job that you can buy them already made. Pigs will not overeat. You would not think that to be true. So if you just give them bulk feed, they will eat what they want to eat, and they will grow fine like that. The only reason that we kind of stepped away from that is because they won't overeat, but they do waste the food. At least the piglets do. This is a smaller feeder. I can't free feed my breeders. That's a whole different conversation. But anyway, your feeder pigs are fine if you want, if just for your sanity and your time's sake, you want to just put bulk feed into a feeder and let them go. The problem that we had is I had baby piglets like trying to sleep in the feed and knocking it out and whatever. So anyway, lots of different options. We obviously go the build your own route with most of the stuff just because I'm a big cheapskate, but you can certainly get store-bought stuff if you need to. Okay, the wallow. Is that my next slide? No, yeah. Feeder, water. Okay. This is a process improvement that I can make. I need to make. It's been on the list for 2 years, but my gosh, my list is ever growing and it never gets around. So I use these shallow livestock tubs as my waters, and you can see that the pigs will also use them, as wallows in the summertime. So I am every day through the warm months. I am every day flipping those things over, getting the mud out, refilling them fresh. I'm making that decision to do that, and if you use a shallow tub, you will have to go through the same process. There is nothing wrong, and my process improvement is to use like a barrel with a nipple water on it. We just haven't gotten around to it because again, you have to be smarter than the pigs, so you have to figure out how to get that thing up, how to keep the pigs off of it. We figured it out, we just haven't implemented it yet. So if you want to use like a tub, obviously it's going to have to be, unless you have like big 500-pound, breeding stock like we also have, you're going to need a shallower tub because the smaller piglets have obviously got to reach over into it. And you've got to get them durable. They've got to be thick and they've got to be durable because they will be used as wallows. You can use the livestock waters. I've got one of those, but again, it's just a matter of getting the water line run out through the field and getting it hooked up. The nipple drinkers, I'm ready to upgrade to that. I just haven't yet. And then the other thing that you can do, which is another thing that I'm super interested in, is like these IBC tote water things. You can, if you Google them, I'm pretty sure that Jordan Green on Farm Builder talks about them or builds them, I think. But anyway, just Google it if you want to be creative and not have the water/wallow situation that I have on my farm. The wallow, like I said, the pigs will make one if you do not have one available to them. They're going to make one where the water is, and so around the water trough. They're even if you have a system wherever that water gets on the ground, they're going to wallow it out and they are going to lounge in it. If you have them out in the field and there's just a low spot in your field or just a spot where it stays, the ground is especially soft, that's another place where they're going to pick to make their wallow. Around a pond, like we have it's not a pond, it's a glorified mud puddle. It's not spring fed, but it's super huge, and the pigs have access to that area, and they'll wallow around the pond anyway, around there too. So wherever the ground is soft, wherever it's already disturbed, or wherever there's water is where they're going to pick to make the wallow. I try to move the wallow spot around the field just because I don't want contamination. I don't want to build up of parasites. I don't want to build up of bacteria in any, specific place. So if I feel like a wallow has been in a certain area, especially when it's hot and things are growing in water, we'll fence that off, let it dry up, and kind of push it in, and then I'll encourage them to wallow it at a different location. So we do try to manage that as much as we can. Okay, shelter. These, oh, you can't see all my pictures. We utilize every building that we come across or had on the farm as an animal shelter of some sort. This does not have to be fancy. Pigs don't care how it looks. What I would recommend is it be 3-sided. You can't see the picture all the way to the right, but it's like this A-frame hut thing that we found I found the plans online. I had my husband build it. The pigs wouldn't go in it. They didn't like it. They didn't use it. Of all of the shelters that we have, that one was probably the most expensive because we bought the lumber, we had the metal. It's just an A-frame, with a metal roof. It has a floor in it. I thought it was cozy and comfortable. They just, that picture is my boar hog who looks dead, but he is snoozing soundly because he's kind of using it, I'm sure, as a windbreak. So keep it to 3 sides. Make sure that it's roomy, that they have room to get in there and maneuver around. Pigs, especially if they are, you have a couple, they like to sleep together. So you want to make sure that there's plenty of room if, your best girl and her best friend decide to cozy up together. They want to be able to move around in there. Pigs are destructive. They are big, so it has got to be sturdy. Build it good. It has to have cover on it, obviously, to keep them out of the weather. Pigs are a whole lot more resistant. They tolerate cold a lot better than they tolerate heat, so you need to make sure that they can get into shade. They tolerate a lot of things, but heat isn't one of them. So I just try to make it where they can get into shade. They can obviously get out of the elements if they choose to. Sometimes they choose to not to, but whatever. Ventilation, obviously, you'll have that if you just have a 3-sided shelter. Room we've already talked about. And then mobile. I have this as a question mark. It kind of depends on how you manage your pigs, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the pastured systems. So if it's mobile, then it's a plus, because if you're moving them from paddock to paddock and you do not have a sacrifice area that they are always going to, then you'll obviously need to move their shelter with them. So depending on how you set up, it may or may not want it mobile. Okay, bedding. This was my favorite pig. His name was Philip. He is actually a pot-bellied pig that when I got him, they told me he would be no bigger than a Cocker Spaniel, and that was not the case. And no, he was a pet, so not all of our pigs have blankets, but he did have a fuzzy blanket. So this is actually the bedding that we use on our farm. So bedding is important because not only is it something obviously for them to bed down to into when they are resting, but it's an important component of their management system because, like I said, they've got these little pointy hooves. They're going to be disturbing the ground. They're going to be rooting. So you're going to be using bedding to also manage the ground where they are. So that the bottom left picture, that is a field that the pigs had access to for several months, and right up by the fence line where their water was and where they fed, there was a lot of disturbance on the ground. Obviously, I don't want parasites. I don't want to permanently destroy that ground. I've got to be feeding the ground. and taking care of it just like I take care of my pigs. So we just took a round bale, and it can be the cheap stuff, it can be the junk hay, it can be, whatever, just whatever you bring in, you're also seeding your pastures, and as long as you're okay with that, it's just to have a deep layer to just keep the pigs, off of that mud, and just let the ground recuperate and dry. So the junk hay is good for that. Round bales, you can just roll them out, and the pigs will root through it, and they'll make their bedding. Straw is good. Fodder is great. The pigs, they'll tear it apart for you. They're looking for the kernels, the corn fodder especially. That they're looking for the little goodies in it, and they just kind of have a good time with it. And then we use a lot of leaves on our farm. I've got a sweet setup with the town of Dayton. So when they go collecting their leaves off of people's lawns every year, they'll just dump them at my house. So we'll have a pile of leaves, half the size of this area, that we'll, just take the skid steer, and then, a load at a time, we'll just dump it wherever the pigs are, because at that time, going into the fall and the winter, that's also the time that I'm pulling the pigs off of the pasture, and so they stay in a sacrifice area, through the cold months, and so there's a lot more disturbance on the ground. So I'm managing my pigs well, but I'm also managing my ground well, just using the leaves. Containment. So this picture, on the left are my girls, on the right is our boar hog, and the only thing that's keeping them separate is those 2 strands of electric wire. But there are 2 different types of fences. There's your perimeter fence, and then there's your fencing for your paddocks. I would really recommend that your perimeter fence be something solid. I say that, and right now my perimeter fence is temporary, but we're just moving the fence lines, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But best case scenario is you have a hard panel fence around the perimeter, and you utilize the electricity to just section off the paddocks, and that way if you have a failure, a power failure, or you have a butthead pig that's going to challenge the fence, you're not getting phone calls from neighbors at 4 a.m. Not that I'm bitter about that. So, pasture systems. We are a work in progress right now. So the picture on the left is my current situation. That board fence is the fence closest to the barn. Right there where the trees are, that is a woven wire fence, and that's the one that we just took down because we're moving it down further into the field. And then we just have that field sectioned off with electricity into areas, and we're moving them from area to area, or I'm moving them from one big pasture to another big pasture, which is okay, but it's not ideal. So my improvement goals for this year are to do, they call it a wagon wheel rotation. So on this picture right here, the yellow line is the fence that is currently in that picture where those tree lines are. And then all of that field that's in crop, we just took some more land out of a crop lease recently, and we're giving that to the pigs. So my perimeter fence is going to be that dark blue line. I'm going to have a sacrifice area with the shelter right up there in the top corner. You can see in that kind of periwinkle line is going to be the sacrifice area, so the pigs will always have access to that area. I'm going to be right up on the fence line, so it's easy access to the barn. All my feeders and all my waterers are going to be right up on the fence line that I have easy access to. From the barn, that big pond is that glorified mud puddle. It's not spring fed, so don't worry, I'm not killing the fishes. The red square is where my girls will go to farrow, separate from the herd. The purple fence will be just a segregation field as I need. And so my intentions are that the pigs will rotate to those different paddocks. So they'll always be in the sacrifice, and I'll just open a gate. And then when they disturb that land enough and it's time for them to move, that gate will shut, and then I'm going to open the next one. So the pigs are going to go through. After the pigs go through, then I'm going to send the chickens through. I've got a mobile egg mobile, So I'm going to let the chickens follow the pigs and clean up after them and kind of, scratch up the ground a little bit. And then after the chickens get out of there, I'm just going to broadcast seed, just good forages for the pigs. So this is my goal 2023. It depends. Every time anybody asks me a question, I feel like my answer is, well, it depends. So it depends on the number of pigs, it depends on the pasture, the paddock size, it depends on the time of year. So in my current situation, those are half-acre paddocks, and I'm not doing my feeder pigs. I'm going to do my breeders this way because I don't grow out too many pigs. Most of our revenue is piglets, so I do piglet sales, and then for a processing workshop or for our own personal use, I'll grow out some pigs. So I imagine that in the spring, when it's wetter, I imagine in my breeders right now, I have 11 sows, and probably I'll have 2 boars going into the season. I imagine, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks I would be moving them, but you can certainly look up stocking rates, and it just depends on the size of those pigs, because obviously 58-week-old feeder pigs are going to have a different impact than 50-year-old, processing weight pigs. So are
you just looking at the main thing of its destruction that they're doing?
Yes. Watch the ground. You can see it. You want them to disturb the ground because, that's healthy for it, but you don't want them to moonscape it. When you moonscape it, which they will do, that's destructive, and you're trying to be good tenants of the land. So keep them moving. If you have the ability to rotate species, so don't keep this, if you can, if you have the option to, don't keep the same species in the same land all of the time. If you can kind of break it up a little bit, try to do that. We talked about a little bit before, if you have a sacrifice area or a place that is just always going to be disturbed, then utilize some sort of deep bedding to keep that healthy. Ideally, you want to have the space, time to regrow, and it'll regrow because the pigs, they're stirring up the seed bank. So don't be scared if you look out and you see that they have disturbed the ground. That's exactly what they're designed to do, and it can be actually good for the soil because they're disturbing it, they're fertilizing it. I mean, it's better than you going through with the rototiller. We do that every year for the garden, right? If it's especially rough and you're concerned about, like, maybe you're going to put your horses or something in there next season, if you want to drag it out or use a harrow in there to just kind of smooth it out, or you can send in the chickens, or if you have a big flock of chickens that need a job, they do a great job at that. And then bonus level, reseed for forages, which is one of my goals. I've been trying to do it kind of here and there, but it's in my strategy for the pigs this year to cognizantly reseed things after the chickens. So nutrition, we're going to go over basic requirements, the grower feed, the maintenance feed, and then some rule of thumb totals. Okay, so I'll give you basic guidelines, and then I'll tell you what I do, because to save my soul, I cannot follow rules. And then just know that wherever you look, there's going to be some slight variations, there's going to be some slight, fluctuations to this, but basically speaking, 2 months old, which is about, a basic weaning age, to about 5 months old, just like any other growing thing, just like any other baby, they're going to have a higher protein need. Grower rations, depending on where you get them from, sometimes they're 15, 16, 18%, like the 4-H pigs that are show pigs, where you're trying to put in major muscle mass in a short amount of time. Like, I think those percentages go up to like 20 or 21%. Don't know. Never raised a show pig. But anyway, you want something kind of in that range. don't overlook the importance of the micronutrients and minerals, specifically the essential amino acids that pigs need is lysine. So they can't make that. It's an essential amino acid. They can't make it themselves. They're going to have to ingest it. So you're going to have to make sure that they get the lysine requirements they need and other things. So just be careful, because as great as YouTube is, you'll come across these videos and like, oh, well, just throw some corn and just throw some soybean and just mix it together and you'll be fine. Yeah, your pig's going to grow. It's probably not going to die, but you're not going to get the best grow out and the best product that you can. So I supplement a lot with external sources, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I have a good solid base feed that I always feed, and it's got the pig mineral mix in there because I just don't mess around with that. And there are people that do, they're kind of experts in their field, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. Obviously, younger pigs, I keep them out on pasture, but they're not going to be able to utilize that green material like an older pig will. So don't expect them to get the nutrients out of their forages like an older pig will. And then, like I said before, they can have access to unlimited feed. As they're growing out, they're going to eat what they need. They're not going to overeat. They might waste it, but they're not going to overeat. And then what I do, and this is just how I've set it up, I like my animals. I like to see them every day. So I feed my anything growing, I feed it twice a day. Anything growing or anything lactating is my basic rule of thumb. So I feed them twice a day. A good rule of thumb for a growing piglet is 1 pound of feed per month of age daily, but not to exceed 6 pounds a day. They really cannot utilize more than 6 pounds of feed a day, and if you're throwing it out there, you're just wasting your feed and you're wasting your money. I have a 15% custom ration blended specifically for me. The co-op makes it. They're delivering, I'm going through about 2,500 pounds of feed a month right now. And because I've got the babies and I've got the lactating mamas and I've got the breeders and I've got all of the things, I don't really want to manage the different percentages of protein. So I kind of met in the middle at a 15%, and then I just supplement as needed for things that need a little bit more of a boost or things that don't need quite that much. And then what you can't see at the bottom of this slide is it says less than 10% DM daily. What does it say? DM meaning dry matter in dairy. There's a whole slide on that in here in a minute, because I do supplement with dairy, and you can and you should, and there's many great benefits to that, but there's some rules to that. Anything that's 6 months and older, they have a lower protein requirement, so you can drop down to more of a maintenance feed. So anytime you go somewhere and it's just like a maintenance ration, that's going to be about a 12 to 13%. You don't need to give them the higher percent feed. You're just wasting your money. Lysine is still important. They need more the energy content in their feed, so there's going to be more of a carb source. They're able to get better utilization of those forages. And then depending on the time of year, you can feed 2 to 6 pounds of food daily. Now, this is based on a meat hog. I don't do the lard types, so I can't speak, and I haven't even looked up like how to manage those, but from what I gather from my friends that do that, like I know that they have pigs, they don't even feed them grain in the summertime. So that would be a benefit, because they have, the best utilization of the forages, and they can graze what they need through the growing months. They do have to supplement them with grain over the winter time. What I do is anything over 6 months, which when our farm is going to be a breeder, I feed them anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds total once a day, depending on the time of year. Like if there's, if we're in the spring and summertime, I've got a lot of supplements to give them. I kind of cut back on their grain a little bit. They still get the 15% custom ration that I have blended. And then they get supplemented with forages and produce. I do a daily pickup from a great big produce stand that's near our house, and I'll talk about that here a little bit later too. With the dairy, I think that's what the bottom that's cut off says. I do a weekly pickup at a local creamery, so I get all of their expired stuff for free. Sweet. But I only give that to my growers. I don't have a supply enough to give it to my big pigs. And that's how I boost the protein for my growers, is I give them that extra dairy. Okay, supplementing with food waste. All of these pictures are I don't pay for this stuff. This is the stuff that I am intercepting because it is a waste product from other farms, from other businesses. And so I intercept it and I feed it to my animals. So specifically, you can see Silas Lipinski and his great milk crate tower. So that is an average weekly haul for us at the creamery, all expired dairy products. The tomatoes, I know a lot of crop growers, and if those tomatoes don't look perfect, they don't go to the auction, so I just pick up the buckets. I do produce, and then I've been known to glean a melon or pumpkin patch or two. So that whole top right corner is just some pumpkins that we got out of a field after the harvest was done. Supplementing food sources. Pigs are just as useful as chickens. So when you're cleaning out your fridge at the end of the week, there should be nothing that's compostable that is going into your trash can. It should all go to the animals. So when I'm cleaning out my fridge, I have a pail in there, I'm throwing it all in there. And I spoke about this a little bit yesterday with the chickens. There are lists of things that you should not feed your pig that are toxic. What I do, I don't pay attention to that per se. My only rule that I stick to is if I have chicken, like an old rotisserie chicken or whatever, I try not to feed that to the chickens. I feed that to the pig, and then if I'm throwing out some pork, I try not to feed that to the pigs. I feed that to the chickens. But basically, everything else, I put it all in there. Pigs are a lot smarter than people. They don't try to eat things that are not good for them. So I put it on the ground as opposed to in their feeders, and so that way they're nosing through it and they're taking what they want. If they don't want to eat it, they're not going to eat it, and then it just composts into the ground. So I just don't put it into the feeders to make them more inclined to eat it if it mixes in with their feed or whatever. Family, friends, and neighbors. Oh, if I know that you have a big family, that you throw out a lot of food, or especially if you're like a food prepper, you get in a bucket. I'm going to give you a bucket. I'll be like, look, put all of your food scraps into this bucket. I'll take it. I'm going to bring you a clean bucket next week, and I'm going to kick you some sausage now and again. I'll give you eggs, whatever you want. Just don't throw away that food. My family is mortified because when we go out to eat, I ask for an extra box, and all the little salad scraps, all the lemon wedges, the parsley stuff, whatever, it all goes into a box, and it's going to something. I don't throw nothing away. Gardens, if you're a gardener, I'm not a great gardener, but I do try to grow things for my animals. That's another great resource. The produce stands, I just made friends with people that own, a great big stand right there in Mount Crawford next to the interstate. They have stuff that that starts to turn. They can't sell it at their produce stand. They have a bakery. So all of that waste, they put it in a designated location, and I try to be helpful. I try to be a service to them so they don't have to worry about that waste. I'm going to pick it up, even if it's stuff I know my pigs are not going to eat. My pigs are not going to eat onions. I know my pigs are not going to eat peppers. I know my pigs are not going to eat potatoes unless they are cooked, and yes, I've gone there. I take it all, I throw it out, I let the animals take what they want, But then I also I'm not going to be a pain in the butt. I'm not going to be picking through it. I'm providing them a service so they don't have to worry about their discards. I want to bring them their containers back the very next day that I'm there, so they don't have to worry about not ever getting their buckets back. So I try to be helpful. I just take it all, and sometimes we're, unrubber banding asparagus or whatever, but we just do that because the benefit of having that diversity in my pig's diet is worth it, and I don't ever want to irritate them and for them to call somebody else to come pick up this stuff. Milk producers, again, like I said, I love the Mount Crawford Creamery guys, every week. I know that every Friday they get all of their returns from their expired stuff from their distributors. So every Saturday I am there. I load up all of the crates, I take it home, I recycle the milk jugs, and then I return them their cartons. And the other things I haven't really utilized yet, I think that there are some rules. But anyway, I wouldn't be afraid to look into grocery stores, especially like health store stuff, cafeterias, restaurants, and bakeries. So just look around. The one thing I would say, well, I guess it pertains to the DNI talk. I'm gonna have to go up and read this from the full screen. I couldn't see the full screen. I'm just going to read it from up here. Not all food waste. Make sure it's worth your time, right? So with the dairy, that's pretty labor intensive because these things, they could be pints, they could be half gallons, they could be gallons. It is very time consuming, and a pound of milk is not worth a pound of feed. I don't call it exploits, but I utilize child labor. So part of my son's daily chores, weekly chores, are he's my milk dumper. That is his job. I pay him for that job, but you have to balance like the labor that you have in this as to what your output is. So maybe dairy is worth it for you. I get a pretty good weekly haul. I think it's worth it for me, and I have help with it, but maybe it's not worth it for you. If you're just getting a gallon or two, you just kind of have to balance that. It's the same with the produce. You have to see what you're getting and really what value you're getting from it versus the inputs that you have to get it. So anyway, a couple slides back with the dairy, I had that less than 10% DM. DM meaning dry matter. Specifically, it's DMI, which means dry matter intake. If you're a dairy farmer, if you manage dairy animals, you know all about what I'm talking about. But this specifically talks about the water content, and it's applicable to all feeds, but I really only kind of pay attention to this when it comes to milk, because milk, it's 90% water. That fluctuates a little bit depending on if it's a skim milk or a whole milk or whatever. But just for argument's sake, I just assume that all milk, because I get all different types and it all gets mixed together, is about 90% water. And you want to keep, if you're supplementing your pigs with dairy, you want to keep your dairy inputs less than 10% of their total ration, but it needs to be less than 10% on a dry matter intake basis. So not, 10% dairy in total, but the dry matter content of that dairy is what counts. The water doesn't count. This is not complicated, and I feel like I might make it more complicated when I explain it to you, but 1 pound of feed of their ration equals about 10 gallons of milk. So you're going to have to feed them 10 gallons of milk to get the same nutritional value as 1 gallon of feed. So you cannot give them a gallon of milk and be like, oh, done, that about as much as they would eat and feed. They're good. They're not good. That theory applies to all feed stuff. Obviously, watermelons, they're going to be mostly water, so they're going to have a lower nutrition value than something a little bit more dense. So if you're going to go down the road of offsetting your feed costs with other inputs, then you really need to pay attention to the dry matter content of things. But specifically, I just pay attention when it comes to dairy, because the other produce, again, I don't even calculate that into their nutritional rations. You can, and people do, but certainly follow those people in what they tell you to do, and not me, because I'm not an expert in it. And I'll give you some resources at the end if you want to look more into that. Also, the thing that to consider is that due to the high fat content of the milk, if you overfeed the dairy, it can affect the quality of your lard. You're going to get softer fat. So that's why I follow the less than 10% DMI dairy rule. Because I've heard this a couple times, and before I found it on the internet, I had some old timers telling me this. Specifically, they talked about overfeeding with milk, and they talked about overfeeding with corn. And in my experience, if enough old people tell you the same thing over and over again, there's probably some truth in that. But don't be afraid to feed milk. Milk is great. It contains extra protein. It contains extra lysine. You can get it for free, and the pigs love it. They will go for the milk ahead of going for anything else I offer every time. They will be fighting each other over the milk. But the con is, like we talked about, it can be labor intensive, especially if you're having to dump all of that milk out yourself. You have to have a way to store it in the summertime, because when it's hot outside, it's going to curdle really, really fast, and you'll have exploding milk cartons, which are kind of almost lethal. So we have a walk-in cooler, so I've got a place to keep it, to store it and keep it cool. But you'll have to manage that. And then, like we talked about before, if you feed too much, you are going to affect the quality of your lard. And we use a lot of lard, and so I highly covet my lard as much as I do meat. Okay, breeding. Check my time. Oh, shit. Okay, gotta talk fast. I wouldn't recommend jumping into breeding. We kind of jumped into breeding, but if you're all about it, I will support you in any way, because I like that aspect of it. If you want, if you have experience with pigs and you don't and you want to do the farrowing part of it, you have to consider: are you going to keep a boar? Are you going to do artificial insemination? It's going to take. You're going to get about 2 litters a year. Max from a sow, but you're going to have to keep that boar year round, so he's only going to have to do his job twice a year. So you have to consider, is that worth it? Keeping a boar hog is a whole nother level than keeping some feeder pigs or a sow. Just like anything with testicles, it can be difficult. Farrowing, you're going to have a nice safe place for that mama to farrow. Is that going to be a stall, shelter, shed? Like that pig that I was fighting with that lost her piglets lost their tails to some frostbite. She preferred a round bale, and there was nothing I could do to convince her of otherwise. Nutritional requirements: you cannot free feed feeders. They're going to get too big. Feeders that are excessively heavy are not going to breed as well. They're going to have smaller litters. They're going to have more difficulty. So you're going to have to manage them a little bit more. Vaccinations. If you keep feeders or breeders on your farm, I vaccinate against some general common issues with piglets. Specifically, I had an issue a couple years back with leptospirosis, and there are some farrowing vaccines that I give just to protect my piglets. I really don't vaccinate my feeder pigs against anything. If you're going to breed, then you're probably going to have little baby boys, and you're going to have to castrate them. Because you don't have to. I do castrate. I castrate between 2 and 14 days.
10 minutes on the rematch stage, starting the fall. Our next speaker is in 10 minutes on the rematch stage, starting the fall. Thank you.
I'll talk fast. So, boar taint, you'll have There's all kinds of opinions on this. So if you are castrating something intact, my experience with this is not all boars have it, and not all people can pick it up. We have processed at least 2 boars that were breeding boars on our farm, and we've never experienced partake with one of them. But I had a cryptorchid pig one time that when we processed, you could smell him. It was bad. So, that's something to consider.
In 10 minutes, at the farm credit stage, we'll be discussing
And weaning. So you're going to have to, around 6, 7, 8 weeks of age, you're going to have a place to keep those piglets away from mama, so you can wean them and keep them separate. And then processing. So this is kind of the point, right? So in 6 to 9 months for a meat pig, or 18 to 24 months for a lard type pig, you're going to have to decide how you're going to get this pig processed. Are you going to do it at home on your farm? Totally doable. We live in the valley. Lots of people do it. Do you want to do a workshop? We do workshops. So if you're interested in learning how to do it yourself, certainly come find me. We can talk about a processing workshop. And then you can do, the custom processing. So if you have if you're selling wholes and halves or whatever, or if it's just for you and your family, you can just take them to a custom processor. And I'm pretty sure the weights for those, you're going to have to be, unless you have a relationship with a processor, you're probably booking these appointments before you even have the piglets. And then if you want to grow for resale, then you're going to have to go to a USDA processor, and that's an even longer wait time. I think that's it. Oh, no, resources. Okay, so if you are really into supplementing with foods and not doing any commercial feeds at all, Walter Jeffries owns Sugar Mountain Farm. He's in Vermont. He's super cool. He's developed a line of pigs, and he's also he feeds them exclusively on food wastes. Jordan Green, his website is Farm Builder. He's in Virginia. He's a big pig guy. I do like to watch his stuff. And then recently I found a guy named Dakota Cohen. He has a farm in Canada, and he does some really cool stuff with how he manages his Berkshire pigs. So there's a lot of information out there. Just find somebody reputable that knows what they're talking about, and just learn as much as you can. That's all I got. Is there any questions specifically? If you have any questions, come find me, talk. I'll talk about pigs all day long, because it's kind of a thing. All right, thank y'all.